All right, so I know that everybody was paying attention to this bill yesterday. It was a little confusing. So Michelle Ehrenberg, me, from Lift Louisiana, is here to break it down with Ellie Schilling. And Ellie, you want to just introduce yourself briefly and then tell me a little bit about what your initial reactions were.
Sure. I am a lawyer in New Orleans who, for one thing, specializes in reproductive rights law and constitutional law. And so I would say that yesterday my takeaway was that even for our legislative body, it was full of lies and misinformation, and ranged kind of from the absurd to the really, truly infuriating. What about you, Michelle? What was your top line takeaway?
I would agree with all of that. There were so many times where I just wanted to interrupt what was happening and say, this is not true. What they're saying is absolutely not true. The other thing that I thought was very interesting is how little Representative McCormick actually understood about his bill, especially because he had heard all of the testimony in the committee about exactly what this bill would do.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for him, but it's also true, as we'll see, for some of the other legislators. That was part of the infuriating thing, is that not only did I want to say, okay, stop, I wanted to say, why? Oh, wait, if only someone had told you this before. Oh, yeah, me and two other really smart lawyers who are women in committee explained this to you already.
That's right. All right, so we're going to watch the debate on the floor and we'll try to break it down for people and explain what exactly is going on here. So let's get started.
14 by Representative McCormick to amend Title 14 relative to abortion, to amend the definition of person, unborn child, provide for defenses, prosecution, enforcement of abortion.
Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud and honored today to bring you HB 813. For just a minute, I'm asking each of you to ignore every political argument that is surrounding this legislation and listen to your conscience. If you are pro-life and believe that life begins at conception, and you believe that we must protect that life, HB 813 is the only bill providing equal protection to the born and preborn people alike. This is a thorny political question, but we all know that it is actually very simple. Abortion is murder. And as lawmakers, we have the responsibility to end it. You can't claim to be pro-life and vote to kill HB 13.
Stop for a second. I think I was just initially sort of surprised that he was not at all toning down the political rhetoric on this. Like, just so people at home know, then there was all kinds of stuff going on in the chamber. It was packed with people, really extremist supporters on his side, lots of disagreement. And he wasn't really trying to back away from that and have sort of a logical discussion about this. It was just like highly emotional. And the idea that there could be equal protection of the laws for the born and the preborn is just something that doesn't even make sense.
Totally doesn't make sense. Like, at what point does a preborn entity have equal protection under the law?
Under this
crazy.
bill, it would be from the moment of fertilization before the embryo was even implanted. Yeah, it would lead to a lot of really absurd consequences. I mean, like, I don't know, like, would embryos be like entitled to like unemployment benefits? I mean, they're gonna not be working very hard, the embryos.
Right.
You know,
exactly. child support.
Mostly going to be unemployed. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right. For a while, actually.
Amendment. If you're pro-life and believe that life begins at conception, and you must stand for equal protection of the preborn. As Roe versus Wade is close to ending, it is time for Louisiana to stand up and end abortion. If we're not willing to do this now, when will we? The vast majority in this room claim to be pro-life, yet today, when Roe is on the chopping block and we have the clear opportunity to end abortion in our state, we are faltering and trying to explain it away. If your life was in danger, you would want equal protection. If 20 of us were slated for murder today, we would want equal protection now. That's the beauty of 813. It provides equal protection, and it does so without affecting ethical, IVF, or the use of contraceptives. It does so without any retroactive effect on any.
Yeah, so how big of a lie was that?
I mean, this is where it sort of gets into the absurd that I don't know for sure if he understands his own bill.
Right.
However, it was explained to him in committee, and it is also pretty obvious. I mean, first of all, the whole equal protection thing, the way that the equal protection clause works is for people who are similarly situated and whether you're treating them differently. So when he just says stuff like, if there were 20 people slated for murder, you would want equal protection. I don't even really know what that means, but clearly here then him saying that it wouldn't affect IVF or it wouldn't affect certain kinds of birth control is 100% untrue, because what the bill would do is from the moment of fertilization, say that that embryo is to be treated the same as a live person, so that any sort of harm done could be a crime, obviously with an abortion or anything, that would end the embryo, that it would be murder. So these are like, he's repeating his talking points, but yeah.
Yeah, well, and he was told, and a lot of people understand that there are some forms of birth control that actually work not, just to prevent a pregnancy from happening, but to prevent a fertilized embryo from implanting in the uterus. So those kinds of birth control certainly would not be legal under this law.
Well, and actually later he says, "Oh, so you mean an abortifacient?"
Correct.
In response to questions, which is like that's not a medically accurate term, but he did know. You're right from the beginning. He totally knew.
Yeah.
Part of Louisiana law. And it does it so in a way that protects mothers who are being coerced into an abortion. And even better, House Bill 813 provides the tools necessary to prosecute pimps and traffickers who are currently coercing women and getting away with it.
Don't we already have laws that could be used to prosecute people who are coercing people into having an abortion?
100%. This is where we start getting into that there's so many false statements all in one. So him saying that it protects the pregnant woman from coercion, it explicitly allows her to be sent to jail for murder. There's nothing in here also that would add to the laws that protect women from things like human trafficking or coercion. Coerced abortions under any circumstances are already illegal. Human trafficking is already illegal. So this doesn't add anything in terms of benefits. It's just, again, sort of one of their main talking points is they love sort of bringing in anything having to do with human trafficking, which is a serious problem. But then they throw it into this context to just completely obfuscate the issue.
Yeah.
The Word of God says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, known by our Creator from our mother's womb. Doctors and scientists have confirmed that belief. DNA proves that without a question. Scientific knowledge has improved, and because of it, we are faced with a moral and ethical decision to make. Will we be prideful and stand by our own ways of ignorance, or will we admit we're constantly learning? It's okay to change our minds, even on a big issue like this one. Today is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, for me too.
I would just say not as uncomfortable as forced pregnancy for 9 months. Just want to note that.
Also, in terms of what he just went through very briefly of the science is not accurate from a medical standpoint, and some of it is completely disputed, but here I am.
This is historic. After this vote, Your name will be written on one side of history or the other. And regardless of how you vote, abortion is going to be abolished. The question is whether you help it end today or we prolong the killing. If we don't believe life begins at conception, we need to admit that. If we do believe that life begins at conception, then we should protect it. Please vote today using your moral compass and nothing else. Politics should never decide who lives and who dies, not in America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right.
Stop for 1 second.
Representative Ivey.
So another thing that I think has gotten confused, and maybe McCormick is confused about this himself, but in terms of when this bill would go into effect, like he keeps talking about the proponents, like, we need this immediately. We can't wait for Roe to be overturned, et cetera, et cetera. But regardless of what they'd done on this bill yesterday, it wouldn't have become law today. And it wouldn't, even if it went all the way through the process, the soonest it would be is like sometime in mid to late June, which is around when we're going to get the decision in Roe anyway. So this whole let's not wait, there's something immediately we can do, in addition to the fact that it would all be unconstitutional, it's just not true.
That's right. Okay, so now there's going to be some amendment stuff, which is a little boring, but let's power through it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative McCormick. Obviously, the decision of possibility that this.
Oh, wait, just kidding. There's some questions.
Yeah, there's some pretty good questions now. We'll see from
potentially pending based on the leaked opinion, but your bill doesn't account for that potential, and your bill does it not include that for your law to be effective, we have to ignore Roe v. Wade today.
Are you asking me that?
Yes, it's in your bill, correct?
When this bill is signed, yes.
Okay, so the question is, does your bill end abortion in Louisiana by simply ignoring the United States Supreme Court's ruling on Roe v. Wade?
Say it again.
Okay.
I don't hear well, and I'm not getting
In order to end abortion in Louisiana today, does your bill simply ignore the United States Supreme Court's decision on Roe v. Wade?
No. Actually, my bill agrees with the decision that was leaked out by the Supreme Court.
No, I'm talking about today. That's a pending, we don't know what's going to happen. I'm saying, so ignore what might happen.
This is all a pretty funny exchange, but just to be clear, then his bill says unequivocally and on multiple occasions that the state would disregard Roe v. Wade and any sort of similar decisions. This was also discussed at length in the committee. There's no way, whatever of these questions he can actually hear, there's no way that this is as confusing to him as he's acting like.
Happen with the overturning your bill in its current posture. Does it require Louisiana, our judges, law enforcement, everyone else, to ignore the current decision of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court in order to make this happen?
Well, Roe v. Wade has been decided. There's another case in court.
Again, we're talking about ending your today, based on what
today my bill's not going into effect, so it doesn't apply to today.
But
that's true.
So anyway, so you refuse to answer that question where your bill says, and let me just quote your bill for the folks at home who may not have read it, because the title's very misleading. It says, recognize the United States Constitution and laws of the states are supreme law of the land. Treat as void and of no effect any and all federal statutes, regulations, treaties, orders, and court rulings which would deprive an unborn child of the right to life or prohibit the equal protection of such right. And so we merely ignore what current Roe v. Wade decision is.
I honestly don't understand.
And that's okay. I understand you don't understand. You wouldn't have brought this if you did. So
that's some pretty good shade from Representative Ivey.
It's true. You wouldn't have brought this if you did, is I think a fair statement. Again, I don't believe that McCormick doesn't understand it, but yes, the basic idea that there is a supremacy clause in our Constitution, that federal law cannot be voided in favor of state law. Yeah. He doesn't seem to understand that.
Does your bill statutorily require judges to ignore Roe v. Wade or any other court ruling or federal law that contradicts your bill? Okay, let me read your text for you.
He's like, no.
Cannot follow the question. Sorry. Yeah, that's like an entire paragraph or more of this, not that long bill is about this. Is about that judges can be thrown out of office if they don't follow his law versus the actual law.
Right.
Because you haven't read the bill in a while.
I would.
Okay, it says.
Could I get somebody to come down here and tell me what he's saying?
Oh my God.
I can't hear and understand.
Can somebody please come tell me what he's talking about? I don't understand my bill.
You can't hear what I'm saying?
I can't understand. I can hear you.
Okay, let me speak slower for you.
Okay.
Okay. Does your bill statutorily require judges in Louisiana to ignore the Roe v. Wade decision or any other future court ruling or other future federal law that would contradict your bill?
Yes.
It does. Okay. And so in your bill, would all Louisiana judges be subject to impeachment proceedings if they do not ignore Roe v. Wade, future United States Supreme Court rulings, or federal laws that are contradictory to your bill?
Judges are a subject to impeachment.
We understand that, but
Sure.
You would make this singular action of
Yes, again, as Ivy's gonna say, I mean, this is one of the features of his bill, is that in knowing that basically this is unconstitutional, you're not going to be able to get people to just disregard the actual law. Then they threw in this like, well, if judges don't do it, we can just remove them from office. And so McCormick's response is like, oh no, I mean, I'm not like inventing impeachment. Impeachment already exists for judges. Sure. Not in this context.
not ignoring federal law, Supreme Court rulings, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they'd be subject to impeachment. Okay. So our founding fathers designed our system of government to be comprised of three separate but co-equal branches. Your bill clearly violates this separation of powers doctrine.
No, it
Do
doesn't.
you believe it is okay to violate constitutional separation of powers in order to abolish abortion in the state of Louisiana?
No.
Okay. If a woman uses contraception that has the potential to prevent the implantation of an embryo, could she potentially be charged with murder, and if convicted, be imprisoned for life?
No.
That is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, under the express terms of his bill, everything he's just said is just like is a lie. The separation of powers part we talked about in committee, it's also pretty obvious. And while this part about birth control might not be obvious from to a casual reader, it is to any lawyer or medical provider, and was discussed in committee. But spoiler alert, folks, when we get to the awesome, fix that the Republicans proposed to this bill coming up, this applies in that situation too, just to this issue of birth control and whether certain forms of birth control would be outlawed under that bill.
That's right. We'll get into that.
Okay. Do you know which contraceptive? Okay, well, so an IUD could not, the use of an IUD would not let, no woman would be prosecuted for murder if they used an IUD, and while using that IUD, it prevented the implantation of an embryo.
Well, my bill would do away with abortifacients.
But that's not an abortifacient.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. I don't think that's the opinion of others.
Yeah, it absolutely is the opinion of others, and specifically all medical associations and physicians, nurses, and other practitioners.
However, there is a fringe part of the right to life of McCormick's, movement that does believe this, that certain forms of birth control are an abortifacient, but it's not supported by science, and it's a very extremist view.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
So
It doesn't eliminate contraceptives. Contraceptives keeps a woman from conceiving. That's the definition of contraceptive.
okay. Well, is the prevention of implantation part of contraceptions?
No.
Yes, it is.
Implantation and when the sperm enters the egg, that's when it takes place.
What takes place?
When life begins, that's when it takes place.
I understand, but
And anything that kills that egg afterwards is aborting it.
but
Now,
preventing
you got-
implantation doesn't kill the egg, does it? Or does it kill the embryo? Right?
We're talking about contraceptives here.
Okay. So
Pause.
Mr. Speaker,
I don't know what they're really talking about here because it's like so much like bad science and the terminology being used, but yeah.
Yeah, Rep. Ivy is like clearly trying to explain to him that there are forms of contraception that prevent implantation of what would be a fertilized egg.
Correct. That fertilization can occur, but that the contraception will operate to prevent implantation. Also, McCormick, I loved it when he just started talking about like conception. Like, okay, well, that's like the fertilization and the implantation. Your bill's just about fertilization, and it doesn't even require implantation. So it applies to like test tube embryos. Yeah. These people should not be legislating in areas of science in general or medicine. That's what's there.
Correct.
here, I'll rest my questions.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any amendments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker, there are two sets of amendments at the desk. The first set of amendments is a one-page set offered by Representative McCormick, set number 3947. Those amendments are technical only.
All right. Any objection to the adoption of the technical amendment? Seeing none, amendments are adopted. Next amendment.
Next set of amendments is a three-page set of amendments authored by Representative Seaball and others. That set number is 4357.
All right.
All right, here we
Louisiana's
go.
been called the
Pause. So let's pause for a second to just sort of explain what it is that they're doing here. So there's another bill, SB 342 by Senator Katrina Jackson. And Representative Seabaugh is going to explain that bill in a super inaccurate way in a minute. And Katrina Jackson has also explained it in a really inaccurate and or just misleading way so far. But they decided what maybe they would do here is rather than actually vote down a blatantly unconstitutional bill that has all of these other consequences, let's just like put another bill in its place and like make that the bill. And then we don't have to vote against the really bad one.
Right. Yeah.
Fair
I mean,
description, I think. I mean, and the one they're substituting it for, as we'll talk about, is also a really, really bad bill. It's just like not like as bad, and it's not as unconstitutional as the original.
yeah, that's right.
most pro-life state in the nation. Most of us are. I am. Look, pro-life bills fly off of this floor with little to no opposition, and they have for generations, for decades. We have many laws which protect the unborn in Louisiana. We have the most stringent abortion protections in the nation within the law. They have triggers. They say when Roe v. Wade is overturned or something else, a federal constitutional amendment, anything along that line that would remove the restrictions placed on us by Roe versus Wade, then these laws go into effect. We started out by allowing abortion only before 20 weeks. There was a bill outlawing abortion after 20 weeks, then after 15 weeks, then after 6 weeks. We had the partial birth abortion ban. We had the fetal heartbeat bill. There's a lot of protections.
Pause for one
the
second.
unborn.
That is all accurate in terms of bills that have been passed. I think it's probably confusing. I mean, and to his point is just like, we've got all the bans, we've got all the laws, but none of those are in effect now. So I think that's sort of important for people to understand going forward.
Yeah, except for the ban on abortions after 20 weeks.
Correct.
I also will just, remind folks or let them know for the first time if they weren't following these issues a couple of years ago, when the 6-week abortion ban came to the floor, there was an effort to amend the bill to add an exception for rape and incest. And Representative Seabaugh came to the floor and said very clearly how opposed he was to having those exceptions in the bill. And he said, if people are upset about someone being pregnant because of rape, kill the rapist. Yes. So he is not a reasonable person on this issue.
I'd forgotten that that was him. Also, that's unconstitutional too. You can't kill somebody for the crime of rape. And he's a lawyer. Well, this will come out at some point. He is a lawyer. So he knows when he is making these politically motivated, inaccurate statements of the law that's all it is.
In Louisiana that exist. And as soon as Roe v. Wade is overturned, they're going to go into effect. And the unborn will be protected in Louisiana. House Bill 813 has a number of problems. Representative Ivey actually did a very good job of going over some of those, the separation of powers and constitutional issues specifically. The U.S. and Louisiana constitutions lay out a system of separation of powers. We have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. The legislative branch does not get to tell the judicial branch how to rule on cases. That's what this bill does. It declares itself to be constitutional, and it says any ruling.
Let's pause for just a second. So first of all, what he's saying now in terms of a general description of the separation of powers issues, then that's true. There was lots of testimony from me and other lawyers at the committee hearing where Seabaugh was there, where he voted in favor of the bill, as we'll see. So, I mean, that's all true. He already knew this and he didn't care about it. Also, some of these things is this implicated the same with SB 342? Why do we need it? We have all the triggers. As he just said, all the triggers, they're going to go into effect if Roe is overturned. And then what was the second thing he said?
Well, hold on. Explain a little bit how some of these separation of powers issues show up in SB 342.
So that was the second thing. SB 342, it doesn't say that courts would disregard the law disregard federal law like this bill does, 813 does. But it would hamstring courts into interpreting laws only on abortion statutes in a really restrictive way, a limited way that would make it difficult for courts to provide the full scope of constitutional remedy that the court sees fit. So when they're talking about it's not the judicial branches or it's not the legislative branch's job to tell the judicial branch what to do, that's 100% true. But Katrina Jackson's bill, SB 342, also purports to do that.
That is a really good point.
That contradicts with the bill is unconstitutional and must be ignored, must be enjoined. You just can't do that. I mean, that's not a power that the legislature has. We can't grant ourselves the power to order a court to rule a future act unconstitutional. We just can't do that. It is very problematic. And look, I think Roe versus Wade is one of the worst decisions this ever come out of the U.S. Supreme Court, ever. I mean, up there with Dred Scott and a couple of others. It is an abomination, in my opinion. But it's the law. Like it or not, it is the law. It's been the law for almost 50 years.
Okay, stop. You hear the people in the gallery.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything he's saying now is true. But again, this was explicitly came out in committee. It's not, and again, as a lawyer, he knew this from the very beginning, that the argument that the proponents made about why the state is allowed to just ignore Roe is because they don't like it and they think that it was wrongly decided, which I pointed out in the committee that if that were the case, then states could just ignore any federal law or any Supreme Court decision that they didn't want, and that you cannot do that. There's no way. So now Representative Seabaugh admits that, of course, but he's known that the whole time and voted for the bill anyway.
It is the law. And look, I grade the constitutional law section of the bar exam. Every year there is a question on the exam about a bill, hypothetical, passed by the Louisiana legislature. Every year. and it's some kooky law. So when I'm reading bills, I look for, is this a good bar exam question? This isn't even a good bar exam question. I promise you, if any examinee read this and argued that it was not a violation of the state and federal constitution, he's going to fail the bar exam immediately. Because this, it's not even.
So it sounds like maybe Representative Seabaugh clearly would have failed the bar exam on his first time around, because this is incredibly obvious in both the language of the bill and the testimony that was provided in committee against it. So somebody should look into that.
How much do you want to bet that this does make it onto the bar exam?
Well, it actually would be a pretty good bar exam question, because there's so many different unconstitutional things to talk about. His point, I think, is that it's not a hard question, but it was for him the first time around.
It sure was.
Close. But this bill has problems other than constitutional. It criminalizes essential elements of in vitro fertilization. It does not actually specifically make in vitro illegal, but it makes elements that are essential to successful in vitro fertilization.
I wonder how he learned that.
I know, it's true. I wonder if there was like a lawyer that had done IVF herself who came and testified about this at the committee.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Illegal. We all know people who were not able to conceive except for in vitro fertilization. It is not something that I'm ready to outlaw. It criminalizes women. Say that however you want, but this bill criminalizes women. One of the issues that Representative Ivey brought up is the judges can be removed or impeached if they rule against this bill. The only way that I know of to remove a judge is to impeach them. So I don't know what the or is, removed or impeached, but it just doesn't seem to make any sense. And look, let me be very clear. If passage of House Bill 813 would prevent one abortion, I would not be standing here right now. But this bill will not prevent a single abortion from occurring, not one. If anybody has told you that passage of 813 will prevent a single abortion, they misled you or they don't know how the law works. Because the fact of the matter is, if we pass this bill and the Senate passes this bill and the governor signs this bill, it will be enjoined the next day, because Roe versus Wade is still the law of the land. The U.S. Supreme Court said you can't do this.
Okay, stop. Yes. So again, this all would have been obvious to Representative Seabaugh when he had the opportunity to raise any of these points and vote against the bill in committee. It is the bill is so unconstitutional on its face that it would not matter if Roe is on the precipice of being overturned or not. A bill like this would be immediately enjoined.
Yeah, and rightly so.
Yes.
So the injunction would go into place and it would not be lifted until Roe versus Wade is overturned. And guess what? We already have laws which are going to go into effect when Roe versus Wade is overturned. So we don't need this bill. It's already protected. And look,
we actually also don't need the bill that you are trying to substitute this bill for.
Exactly. That's what's about to happen now. And just so that people understand sort of the basic overview of SB 342, it does all the stuff that I already talked about in terms of some questionable instructions given to the judiciary, but it's also resurrecting old criminal abortion bans off the books to put them back into statute and increase the criminal penalties for them when, as these very same people have already explained, we've got all the bans, we've got all the triggers. Why would we need that?
Yeah.
We're a nation of laws. I've heard a lot. There's a guy wearing a shirt outside, and I have several people tell me, why don't we just ignore Roe? Wouldn't that be fun if we could just ignore the Supreme Court? Look, we're a nation of laws. We can't do that. But let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that right now, one of the penalties for murder is the death penalty. It's available. It's in the books. If you know somebody has committed murder, you cannot go over to their house and shoot them.
Although that is almost precisely what he suggested in the debate over whether to add a rape and incest exception into the bill banning abortions at 6 weeks or
So McCormick has some other questionable bills on this subject matter of when you can just kill somebody, but
Yeah.
Can't do that without facing the consequences. It is itself, in fact, murder. You can't do that. We cannot ignore the law. We have a rule of law in this country, and we can't do that. Look, the Representative McCormick is obviously committed. He has deep commitment. The people here supporting him have commitment. But this bill's passage would not prevent a single abortion, not one. And I would like to go ahead and offer the amendment at this time, which I'll have on your computer. I don't know if it's been passed out, but you can see there, it is essentially Representative Jackson's Senate Bill 342. It keeps the Roe versus Wade triggers in place. If and when Roe versus Wade is overturned, those triggers go into law. It clarifies some of the law. It has a severability clause. It clarifies what Louisiana law will go into effect when Roe versus Wade is overturned. It specifies that it is unlawful for a physician to perform the abortion.
stop for a second. So what he said is like relatively accurate about her bill, but it does a little bit of the same thing, of course, that she has done when describing this bill the whole time, which is kind of gloss over the whole thing. So again, like the main component of the bill now that they are trying to substitute in is to resurrect old criminal abortion bans and make even greater, more draconian criminal penalties to add to them, like 10 years in jail, 15 years in jail, $100,000 fines, $200,000 fines, when already the trigger ban that we have can be enforced through throwing people in jail, fining people, and disciplinary actions against physicians. So it's not just clarifying the law, it is like explicitly criminalizing abortion again in a way that is unnecessary, bad public policy, and could obviously lead to all sorts of problems like all of our laws that have over criminalized any sort of context have.
Yeah.
The criminalization of the physician or other person who performs the abortion, not the woman seeking abortion. It does not outlaw contraception.
Yeah. Okay. So
two things on this. Let's start with that. So he is correct that the bill, the 342 bill is aimed at criminalizing the physician or others. It's not aimed at criminalizing the pregnant person. There is an exception for the pregnant person. But as we've seen in our state and other states, then the language of those exceptions is often not sufficient to protect the pregnant person from prosecution, which Representative Seabaugh should also know, because on a different bill, Mandy Landry's HB 1027, then the law on this and the science on this was explained to him. He also, that would protect, it was a bill to affirmatively protect women from such prosecutions under any kind of circumstances. He voted against that bill. He, in fact, was the person on the committee that objected to that bill moving forward.
yeah.
Now, why don't you talk about the birth control part?
Yeah, so there is a provision in Senator Jackson's SB 342 that makes some attempt at exempting contraception from these criminal penalties, but the way that it's worded is pretty unclear, and it seems to not exempt all contraceptions. I think that things like IUDs, some forms of emergency contraception, those methods which not only can prevent fertilization, but can also prevent implantation, would still be potentially unlawful under Katrina Jackson's SB 342.
Yeah, so just to add to that, then her bill still defines like a person, the unborn child, as from the moment of fertilization. And because there is not a clear exemption in her bill for contraception, like it doesn't just say contraception shall not be prohibited under this bill, or nothing about this bill can apply to contraception. It like carves out some weird language about what type of contraception that I think is intended to go back to the point that was made earlier, that it's not, if it prevents fertilization, or if it allows for fertilization but just prevents implantation, that would be outlawed.
Yeah. And the other thing to note about the the bill, saying that a pregnant person, shouldn't face criminal prosecution for having an abortion, that really wouldn't exempt them from being reported by medical providers, and some sort of investigation, whether or not they were going to be charged, but some sort of investigation that would try to ascertain, where they obtained an abortion, how they were able to acquire abortion medication, or, who might have helped them. So I do think that these are still really dangerous laws, and that it is, setting up an opportunity for, reporting by medical providers, because they're really unclear of the law and what their obligations are, law enforcement getting involved in launching investigations, and that is going to prevent people from seeking emergency care if they are having a pregnancy complication. You may not go to the
100%.
hospital. Yeah, you may not go to the hospital if you think that there that something, something that is happening to you medically could be reported to law enforcement.
Right, because as was described at this same committee and with Representative Seabaugh there by medical providers, then the complications from a miscarriage look the same in most instances than the complications from an induced abortion. So there's a lot of room for just like speculation and, bias to come into play. And the way to prevent that, to prevent people from being investigated and prosecuted, is to put an affirmative protection in the law, like HB 1027 would have, that this person voted against, and that this person essentially killed that bill.
Yeah.
With the moniker, if it is administered prior to the time when a pregnancy could be determined through conventional medical testing. It does not criminalize any aspect of in vitro fertilization, and it does not apply any criminal penalties to the pregnant female. That has always been an essential element of pro-life law. Louisiana law has always been about protecting the babies and protecting the women, and this amendment will continue that.
So again, that is true when you just compare it side by side, like 813 to 342. Then the murder bill is explicitly aimed at charging the pregnant person and charging that person with murder. So he's right. This is a move in the right direction, that it's saying that that's not what the intent of the bill is, and that's not how the bill should be used. But he should not be like this secure in the knowledge that people are not going to be prosecuted or not going to be thrown into jail for all of the reasons that we just talked about. It does not do enough to ensure that that will not occur.
That's right.
Bill 813 in its current form does not. Personally, I want to apologize to each and every one of you. This bill came through Criminal Justice Committee. I sit on that committee, and I should have done this in committee, and I didn't. I voted the bill out of committee because by the time I figured out what I was supposed to do, it was too late. We're having to do this here. If we had done our job in committee, we could have amended it in committee, and we could have avoided this. And for that, I want to apologize to you because I didn't have the idea soon enough.
Yeah, so we're going to actually see the vote.
Yeah. And so, just again, he acts like, oh, I just didn't know, like maybe I hadn't read the bill, or, nobody was there. Like, as one of my other colleagues who testified against the bill said when she was watching this, oh, wait, if only someone had told him in committee about all these problems with the bill. He was told that. And when he says, like, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, I think that means that he wasn't clear on whether the powers that be within the Right to Life movement supported this bill. So he went with, let's vote it out of committee. And now he knows that the Right to Life, that Louisiana Right to Life and the Family Forum doesn't support it. So what he was supposed to do was to vote against the bill.
So here's the vote.
We'll ask for a call of a vote.
Representative Bakala? Yes. Yes. Representative Bryant? Representative Fontenot?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Garofalo?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Gudo? Yes. Representative LaFleur? No. Representative Marcel? Representative McCormick?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Hodges? Representative Muscarello?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Nelson? Representative Seabaugh?
Absolutely.
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 Yes. Representative Villio? Representative Marino? No. No. 7 yeas, 2 nays.
Based
Yeah. I wanted to play the
Yes.
entire vote so that people could see that it wasn't just Representative Seaball, but every single one of the Republicans and conservatives on that committee voted for this bill.
That's correct. And again, where he said absolutely, and now he's talking about like, oh, this bill could, women, the pregnant women could be thrown in jail under this bill. That's exactly what part of our testimony was about, is that this is a homicide bill. This means that the pregnant person is going to be thrown in jail. And you failed to protect those people last week when you didn't pass HB 1027. Like, that comparison was made. And that's what he's saying absolutely to, is yeah, absolutely. Let's start throwing the pregnant woman in jail.
That's right.
upon the leaked opinion that we all read a couple of weeks ago, it looks like Roe versus Wade is about to be overturned. We're on the precipice of the most significant pro-life victory in this country in 50 years. We should be celebrating together, embracing each other as brothers in Christ. We should not be at each other's throats over a bill that is blatantly unconstitutional, makes criminals out of women, would not prevent a single abortion, and as far as I can tell, was only presented to give a couple of misguided people a platform. So I ask you please join me in approving this amendment, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, we do have a question. Representative McGee for a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, under Louisiana's law on murder,
Currently or in the bill?
Current law of murder does not prescribe, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if this bill was to pass, you could go back and arrest every woman who had an abortion, is that correct?
There's some language in the bill that attempts to prevent that, but I don't believe it would be effective. So the answer to your question, I think, is yes.
And
look at him like lawyering now, reading the bill.
Under Louisiana law principle, then you could also arrest the father as well, is that correct?
Theoretically, yeah.
Possibly the mother.
Yes.
Would you agree with me the most powerful testimony at a pro-life rally or any pro-life argument is a woman who regrets having an abortion?
I'm sorry, can you say that
Would
again?
you agree with me that the most powerful testimony that anybody can give for pro-life argument is a woman who had an abortion who regrets her decision?
Yes.
So we would be potentially arresting that woman.
That would be correct, yeah.
You would agree with me that IVF brings life into this world.
Absolutely.
And under this law, proposed by Representative McCormick, the parents could be arrested for murder for trying to have a baby.
Yes.
The doctor could be arrested for murder for trying to help people have a baby.
If the fertilized embryos are destroyed, yes.
And you would agree with me,
Stop.
spend thousands.
Again, there was another lawyer who talked about the law and her personal experience with IVF to the committee that Representative Seabaugh heard. He wasn't concerned and specifically said that this would allow for both the patient and the physician to be charged with all kinds of different crimes. He wasn't concerned about that at the time.
Yeah. Maybe it was because it was a Black woman who was
That's
delivering
true.
that testimony.
Sure. Yeah.
Thousands of dollars to bring these kids into the world.
Absolutely.
To love them, to nurture them, to care for them.
Yes.
And under your amendment, that's no longer possible, correct? IVF
Clarify the question. The bill does not affect IVF, current laws on IVF in any way.
So your amendment's is going to take out of all the stuff
Yes.
in Representative McCormick's bill where we could have prosecuted
Yes.
loving couples who want to bring babies into the world.
Correct.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
All right, no more questions. Is there any objection
So
to the
stop
adoption
one
of this
second.
amendment?
I think that is an accurate statement of SB 342 in terms of the fact that it would not have an effect on IVF like HB 813 would have. But again, it's not, they either do not want anyone to know or they do not understand that that's not the case. SB 342 will have an effect on some common FDA approved contraception and emergency contraception, and in fact could outlaw those things.
Yep.
All right, on your objection.
I do appreciate y'all being here today, but I do want to thank all of my supporters that are here today. Now, this is an odd place, because a week ago, the gentleman that's offering the amendment was one of my biggest supporters and encouragers in telling me that it's time to do this. But this isn't about me. It's not about anybody in this room. It's about the 20 babies a day that are being ripped out of the wombs of the mothers by hands, by their feet, and tore apart. That's something we need to address. But evidently, the political winds are blowing, and it won't be addressed today. I'll be glad when we come in here and we can abolish abortion, do away with it, be done with it. That's what I'm looking forward to. The main reason I can't support this amendment is because this amendment does away with equal protection. Equal protection gives the unborn baby the same rights as a born baby. That's what it does. You know, it's really simple.
Stop for one second. So it does. So the bill doesn't do away, the SB 342 doesn't do away with equal protection. He just means by amending it to eradicate his proposal, the 813, that you wouldn't have this vast unconstitutional expansion of the concept of equal protection, that even beyond Roe would be a vast unconstitutional expansion of that concept.
If we don't do that, if we vote for this amendment, we say those babies are subhuman. Now, if we don't believe life begins at conception, hey, I understand that completely. I understand. But my conviction is solid. And like I've asked Representative Seaball when he supported my bill, and everybody in here that talked to me, bring me an amendment. We want to work with everybody in here. We want to make this bill better. Not one amendment, not one conversation that brought an amendment to the floor. You know, we talk about Representative Seaball sits up here and shoots holes in this legal document. All due respect, I love him. He's an insurance attorney. If I went to him.
Stop. I found myself sort of like kind of on McCormick's side at this point. I mean, not in terms of obviously the argument he's making about the bill, but that just the disingenuous nature of Representative Seabaugh in his like full-throated support at the committee, and then coming in and acting like this is all like news about the bill. But I do love this part too. This guy's just an insurance lawyer.
And ask him to defend me in this case, he would say you would need to go hire somebody that knows something about this. Now, as you very well know as lawyers.
And that could be Ellie Schilling.
Yeah.
We can put 20 in a room.
Who he didn't listen to.
They can argue what the
That's who you would recommend.
is for 3 days. It's that simple. But anyhow, I do appreciate your time, and I do respect all of you. And I thank you for the opportunity, and God bless you.
All right. Representative Seaball, close on your amendment.
It's true, I am an insurance attorney. But who'd you rather take legal advice from? Anyway, do the right thing and vote for this amendment. Thank you.
All right. Representative Seaball offers up an amendment which Representative McCormick objects to. All those in favor of the amendment vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Members, vote your machines.
Let's pause for
let's like let people know that what was happening within the basically the Republican caucus in the House before this bill came up was a lot of conversation, and there was a lot of concern that there were not enough Republicans in their caucus to go on record actually opposing HB 813. So they introduced this amendment to try to, have something that they could vote on that would show sort of their opposition to 813, but also affirm their support for draconian anti-abortion bans. So, but there were, up until the moment that this bill came to the floor yesterday, there was a question as to whether or not there were enough Republicans in their caucus to kill this bill. And I think it's really important for people to know that, that
Kill
this
HB
is
813 in its original form.
right.
Yeah.
This is not, this is, this is such an extreme law. But there are extremists that are elected, to the House of Representatives that couldn't bring themselves to oppose on the record. On the record is important here. This very, very, very extreme law.
So the other thing I want to add to that I think is important is, as we'll see, then the Democrats do not support this amendment. They either voted against it or they didn't vote on it at all. So it's like a little bit confusing insofar as that what the Democrats are saying here is that this amendment is already really bad, and solving the bad bill by putting in place of it a bill that's like slightly less bad is not how you deal with this problem. Why would we vote in favor of a bad amendment? Let's just vote on the bill and vote against it and get this over and done with. So the only part that I think is a little bit confusing is that when you're looking at who voted against the amendment, with the exception of Representative McCormick and Representative Amity, who by voting for the amendment are signaling their support for the main bill, everyone else is signaling their opposition to this whole scheme, the whole thing.
Correct.
Vote your machines, members. Vote your machines. You through voting? Through voting? All right. Close them up. 65 yeas, 26 nays, and the amendment is adopted. Representative McCormick on your bill.
Hello, and like I said, I do want to say I appreciate this, and I don't want this conversation to end, but I think it's ended for today. Mr. Speaker, if you don't mind, I'd like to remove this bill back to the calendar, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Without it.
So that essentially kills the bill for now. But I do want to point out that this bill, because it was returned to the calendar, it wasn't actually voted down. It could actually be brought back. And so I did a little research this morning to explain how that could happen. So the rules say that only the author can bring the bill back. If the author gives notice at least 1 day in advance that they intend to do that, then it takes a simple majority of the members present that in the chamber and voting if there is an objection. So if McCormick lets his colleagues know a day in advance that he's going to call it from the calendar, there could be an objection, which there certainly would be, and he would need a majority of those present to be able to actually bring it to the calendar. If he chooses not to give notice and call the bill from the calendar, and there is an objection, then it takes 2/3 of the members present to allow him to call it from the calendar. So there will be objections. We don't know if he has any intention of trying to do this or not, but I did want to explain to people that having it returned to the calendar does not necessarily mean that it is like dead this session.
Yeah, I think so a couple of things. I mean, in other words, if he wanted to signal that in its entirety, there's much stronger measures you can take. You can ask that the bill be withdrawn from the record, that like you say, okay, this bill no longer exists. However, since it's been amended so that his basic concept of the bill has been taken out, I think that it's not very likely that he would bring it back unless he thinks he has the votes to re-amend it back to put 813 in. But the important thing I think for people to watch is that the substitute bill, the SB 342, that is live. So that they amended this bill to put that in and then tabled this bill. But that bill is moving separately. It is moving fast. It's scheduled in committee this coming Tuesday. And this is, just the bill that's a slightly better version of HB 813. But still would be resurrecting old criminal bans, adding more draconian criminal penalties, potentially outlawing certain forms of contraception, having insufficient, although better protections for the pregnant woman. So there's still a lot to be written on exactly how this is going to go down, is I think what Michelle and I are trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. So we will let everybody know what happens with SB 342, but in the meantime, everybody should reach out to their state representative and let them know that they oppose that bill as well. Any last things to say, Ellie?
No.
Okay. Hope this helped. If you have questions, you can reach out to info@liftlouisiana.org. Thanks.
Thank you.